Family secrets don't usually come out all at once, but sometimes one conversation can change how you see the people closest to you forever. These are 5 family secrets that destroyed relationships, and the first one started with a meeting none of us expected. Story 1, the inheritance surprise. When my grandfather passed away, everyone in the family assumed we already knew how things would end. My older brother had always been the favorite. At the funeral, people kept saying the same thing, that he would probably inherit most of the estate. He lived closer, visited more often, and my parents constantly talked about how much he helped out. So when the lawyer called both of us to his office a few weeks later, my brother treated the whole thing like a victory lap. On the drive there, he even joked that I shouldn't get my hopes up. According to him, our grandfather had made it obvious who deserved the house. I didn't argue. After years of hearing the same thing from my family, I had already gotten used to being second place. The lawyer started by going through the basic paperwork. My brother barely listened to any of it. He leaned back in his chair like the result had already been decided. Then the lawyer paused and pulled out a separate document from the folder. He explained that a few months before my grandfather died, he had made a final change to his will. For the first time that morning, my brother actually leaned forward. Up until that moment, he had been acting like the meeting was just a formality. But now he looked at the lawyer and asked what kind of change could matter that late. The lawyer didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slowly flipped through a few pages, like he was double-checking something. The silence in the room suddenly felt a lot heavier. Then he started reading, but he wasn't looking at my brother. He was looking directly at me. According to the updated will, the house and most of my grandfather's savings were being left to the person who had been quietly helping him manage his finances and medical appointments during his last year. There was a brief pause before the lawyer said the name, mine. My brother immediately said there had to be some mistake. He insisted he was the one who had been helping our grandfather the most. But the lawyer calmly slid another document across the table. It was a record of every appointment, every payment, and every visit during that entire year. All signed, all documented, all done by me. For the first time that morning, my brother didn't have anything to say. Then he asked the question that made everything worse. If he was helping you this whole time, why didn't anyone in the family know about it? The lawyer didn't hesitate. Because your grandfather asked him not to. Apparently he wanted to see who cared about him when there wasn't anything to gain from it. And after that meeting, my brother never spoke to me again. But the next story didn't involve lawyers or paperwork. It happened at a wedding, and the truth came out in front of almost 200 guests. Story 2, sister wedding betrayal. My sister had been planning her wedding for almost a year. It was one of those events where every detail mattered. The venue was expensive, the decorations were elaborate, and the guest list was so big that half the people there barely even knew the family. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But the truth was, the wedding almost didn't happen at all. About 3 months before the ceremony, my sister called me late one night sounding completely panicked. The venue deposit was due the next morning, and somehow she had come up short. She said it was only temporary and promised she would pay me back after the wedding once everything settled down. At the time, I didn't think twice about helping. She was my sister, so I transferred the money and covered the deposit. After that call, we barely talked about it again. The wedding planning continued, invitations were sent out, and eventually the big day arrived. The ceremony itself went smoothly. Family photos, speeches, the usual things you expect at a big wedding. Then the reception started. About halfway through the evening, my sister stood up to give a speech. She thanked our parents, the guests, and everyone who helped make the day possible. But then she said something that immediately caught my attention. She told the room that none of this would have happened without the incredible support of her new husband and his family. According to her, they had stepped in at the last minute and saved the wedding when things almost fell apart. I remember sitting there confused, wondering if I had heard her wrong, because the story she was telling the room didn't include the person who had actually paid the deposit. When the speech ended, people started clapping and raising their glasses. That's when my dad leaned over and asked a simple question. If his family paid for the venue, why did your bank send you that transfer receipt? Our entire table went quiet. My sister froze for a moment, like she suddenly realized what he was talking about. Someone from the groom's side asked what he meant. My dad didn't raise his voice. He just pulled out his phone and showed them the bank confirmation, the one with my name on it. Now everyone at the table was staring at my sister. For a few seconds, she tried to laugh it off like it was some kind of misunderstanding. But the groom's mother immediately asked the question my sister clearly wasn't expecting. So if we didn't pay the deposit, who did? The groom slowly turned toward her like he was hearing the truth for the first time. And suddenly the entire story my sister had just told to 100 people didn't make much sense anymore. By the end of the night, the wedding wasn't what anyone was talking about. It was the speech. But the next secret wasn't revealed in front of a crowd. It came out while we were cleaning out a house. And what we found inside an old filing cabinet explained something that had confused our family for years. Story 3, Parents' Hidden Will. After my grandmother passed away, the family had to clear out her house before it could be sold. Most of it was the usual process: boxes of photos, old furniture, and decades of things nobody had touched in years. My dad and I were working through one of the spare bedrooms when we found a small metal filing cabinet tucked in the back of the closet. At first it looked like it only held ordinary paperwork, utility bills, insurance documents, that kind of thing. But at the very bottom drawer there was a folder that didn't match the rest. It had a lawyer's letterhead printed across the top. My dad opened it and immediately stopped talking, which was strange, because up until that moment he had been non-stop complaining about how much stuff we had to go through. I asked him what it was. He didn't answer right away. Instead he just handed me the document. It turned out to be a copy of a will, but it wasn't my grandmother's. It was my grandfather's, and the date on it was from nearly 15 years earlier. That alone didn't make sense, because when my grandfather passed away, everyone in the family had always said he never left a will. At the time the estate had simply been divided up the normal way, but this document said something completely different. According to the will, my grandfather had planned to leave a large portion of his savings to my aunt, not to my dad, not split evenly between the family, just to her. That would have been surprising on its own, but the strangest part wasn't the will. It was the note clipped to the front of it. The note was written in my grandmother's handwriting, and it explained exactly why nobody in the family had ever heard about this will before. Apparently my grandfather wrote it after helping my aunt through what he believed was a serious financial crisis, but shortly before he passed away, my grandmother discovered something he never knew. My aunt hadn't been in financial trouble at all. She had been quietly taking money from him for years. According to the note, my grandmother decided not to tell the rest of the family what had happened. Instead, she removed the will and handled the estate herself when he died. My dad read the note twice without saying anything. Then he folded the paper slowly and placed it back inside the folder. Neither of us spoke for a while. It was the first time we realized how much our grandmother had been protecting the rest of the family. Finally, my dad leaned back in the chair and said something that explained why the truth had stayed hidden for so long. If she told everyone the truth, it would have destroyed the family. And suddenly a lot of things about our family started to make a lot more sense. But the next secret didn't come from old paperwork or a hidden note. It came out during a family dinner, and it started with an accusation that should never have been made. Story 4: Family secret revealed at dinner. Every Sunday my parents hosted dinner for the whole family. It had been a tradition for years. My brother, my aunt, a couple cousins, sometimes even neighbors stopped by. Most weeks it was loud but harmless, people arguing about sports, work, or whatever drama was happening that week. But one Sunday dinner turned into something completely different. Halfway through the meal my aunt suddenly slammed her fork down on the table. She said money had been disappearing from her account. Not once, several times over the past few months. At first she thought it might be a banking mistake, but then she said something that made the entire table go quiet. According to her, the only person who had helped her set up online banking was me. So in her mind the explanation was obvious. She looked straight at me and said I must have been transferring money without her noticing. For a moment I thought she was joking, but when I looked around the table nobody else was laughing. My brother asked if there was any proof. My aunt said the bank told her the transfers came from a device already connected to the account, and since I helped set everything up, she assumed it had to be mine. My mom asked if anyone else could have accessed the account, but my aunt kept insisting there was no other explanation. At that point everyone at the table was staring at me waiting for an answer. I tried to explain that I hadn't logged into her account in months, but my aunt cut me off before I could finish. She said the timing of the transfers proved it was me. That accusation made the room even more uncomfortable, because now it sounded like she had already decided I was guilty. That's when my cousin finally spoke up. He had been sitting quietly at the end of the table listening the whole time. Then he reminded everyone about something my aunt seemed to have forgotten. A few months earlier she had asked him to help install a new banking app on her phone, which meant his device had also been used to log into the account. My aunt immediately said that didn't matter, but my cousin had already opened his phone, because the bank had sent him a notification the day the last transfer happened. He turned the screen around so everyone could see it. The login location was clearly listed. It wasn't my phone. It wasn't even my house. It was my aunt's own address. The table went completely silent, because suddenly the story she had been telling all night didn't make sense anymore. My brother leaned back in his chair and looked at her. Then he asked the question nobody else wanted to say. If it didn't come from him, then who transferred the money? And for the first time since the argument started, my aunt didn't have anything to say. But the last secret in this family had been hidden for years. And when the truth finally came out, it completely changed how everyone saw the same story. Story 5: The favorite child lie exposed. Growing up, everyone in our family knew my younger brother was the favorite. My parents never actually said it out loud, but it was obvious in 100 small ways. He got away with things I never could. When he forgot responsibilities, someone else fixed the problem for him. When I made mistakes, it became a long lecture about expectations. Over time I just learned to stop arguing about it, because nothing ever changed. But the biggest difference between us wasn't how we were treated. It was what happened when we both graduated high school. My parents told the entire family that they had saved money for my brother's college. They said they wanted to give him the opportunities they never had. When people asked why they hadn't done the same for me, the answer was always the same. Apparently, they had helped me in other ways over the years, so the college savings had already been used. At the time I didn't question it. I assumed maybe they had helped with expenses I didn't remember. Years passed. My brother finished college. Life moved on. Then one day I was helping my dad clean out the garage. We were going through old boxes filled with paperwork and bank statements. That's when I found an envelope with my name written across the front. Inside was a stack of documents from a college savings account. The account had been opened when I was a kid, and according to the statements, it had been growing for years. At first I thought it was just an old account that had been closed normally, but the most important page was the last one, because it showed exactly when the account had been closed. The date was the same year my brother started college. I showed the paperwork to my dad and asked him about it. He stared at the statements for a long moment before saying anything. Then he admitted something the rest of the family had never known. The money in that account hadn't disappeared. It had been transferred straight into my brother's tuition fund. For years everyone had believed my parents only saved for one child, but the truth was they had saved for both of us. They just decided only one of us deserved it. And after that conversation, it was impossible to see my family the same way again. I never told the rest of the family what I found in that envelope. But from that day on, I understood something about my parents that I hadn't fully accepted before. If you made it this far, you probably enjoy stories where the truth finally comes out. So if you want to hear more real situations like these, consider subscribing to the channel. And tell me in the comments which story surprised you the most, because sometimes the biggest family secrets are the ones nobody talks about.